Ellany Kayce, and an old tribal member of the Tlingit Nation, Raven Clan. Ellany Kayce has worked as a racial, environmental, indigenous, and social justice educator and program developer. Her work with Alaska Native, Native American, and First Nations communities as a trainer, traditional drummer, singer, dancer, and activist ensures equitable treatment for Indigenous people and builds bridges between cultures. Miguel Costop. Miguel taught to reject spirituality, though his family practiced elements of the Mayan worldview unawares. Miguel now walks a triple path, drawing on Franciscan, Quaker, and Mayan spirituality. And John Skinner, our moderator, a member of Twin Cities meeting and Northern Yearly meeting, John has a history of local, regional, and national service in the Religious Society of Friends. He clerked the 2023 Evening Plenary Subcommittee and will co-clerk the 2024 Gathering Committee. The Reverend Dr. Randy Woodley and FGC regret that Dr. Woodley couldn't be with us this evening due to travel difficulties. So unfortunately, he will not be able to address this gathering. So now I'd like to turn it over to our speakers for our blessing.
Good Steve, the Tlingit for thank you, good Steve. As she mentioned, I'm an enrolled tribal member of the Tlingit Nation. I am of the Raven Frog clan from Alaska. Born and raised in Seattle, and I'm honored to be here. I'm going to start this evening with my handheld drum and singing a welcoming song. Some of you may have heard this before. I do it 4 times for each of the 4 directions. And I would love for you to join in if you would wish to, especially the children. Way, ah, way, Thank you.
Amina Kamajashir Chavel, Nimalaka Peshet, Dupush Ka, Dupush Lev, Dimachas Parch A, the Kunda Makre, I could take it Pachala Kore. Amina Kamajashir Chavel, Mati Repa, Dikain, Dumana Sipa, Dikan. Amina Kamajashir Chavel, Ruma, Dikahala, Dikain, Dumachka, Nayari Ashtel, Hero Kefkir, Pushka. También les falta más de saber más acá, Cherry de aquí, Rumano Yari Katanas, y Rumano Yari Kakasle. Camila Matías Chávez. Caballería Chávez está, Rumar de Gele, y lo color ir. Rumar como yo, plan, y están con yo, de Camila, las cosas, diga. Camila Matías Chávez, Chela Bachalán, de todo a ver quién. Chile Kashaka, la cuarta de Kachacus, de Carapaz, Chinchiponoques, Cacayo, ya, Matías Chávez, Camila Matías Chávez. Camila Matías, muchas gracias. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Miguel Costop, and what I did is a brief prayer and thanking for the four energies of the universe, that rule our lives, that makes us allowed to be here and to be in good health. And so I also ask that He will lead our minds, our words, and our thoughts. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? I can't hear you. Good evening. We're live. And hello up in Zoom land, and hello Junior Gathering. I was wondering if we could all really welcome the Zoomers by saying, hello friends in Zoom. Ready? 1, 2, 3. You know, that's all we had for the past 3 years was Zoom. And we're grateful for it. And we're grateful for being together tonight. Children, it's time for you all to head to your junior gathering programs. I hope you have a great time. And tell us all about it later before bedtime. Well, there's a silence on the because it's so much silence. They are the quietest breathing junior gathering group I've ever heard. Again, my name is John Skinner, and I'm thrilled to be here with Ellany and Miguel this evening to have a conversation on listening to the earth. We're going to do it a little bit differently than others have been done. And as was mentioned, we're going to have questions in the middle. And I think you'll all understand why. Sometimes when we have questions at the end, the program kind of just fizzles, and some people start to meeting, and others ask questions that really aren't questions, really statements that are really hard to answer to. So instead, we're going to have questions in the center. And so if you got your card, make sure when you write a question to put down who the question is for. And we'll pick out some, and we'll get some from you in chat on Zoom. So we're going to start with something that I think most of you are familiar with, And that is, the idea of a spiritual journey, a miniature spiritual journey. In my meeting, it used to be called this, I believe. And I think a lot of unprogrammed meetings have adult-ed programs that follow. But I wanted to give both Ellany and Miguel an opportunity to share some about how they ended up right here today, especially recognizing that the impression of indigenous stories is widespread around the globe. It's been happening in different ways. Sometimes it happens by extermination, sometimes by subjugation, and sometimes by enslavement. So let's hear. So I'd like to hear a little bit about your beliefs about spirit and about yourself, your family, however you define family, and perhaps you define family in a different way than most of the people in the audience do. Your community, and these days increasingly about the world that we live in. In particular, I think our audience tonight might be very interested in hearing how you listen to the earth or the cosmos in your personal and cultural spiritual practices. We're just going to do many versions, so you're going to get the highlights. And I invite you to talk with Miguel, who will be here all week, and Ellany, who will be here later this evening. Let's start with Miguel. Any questions you got before we start?
Thank you very much, friends, and thank you for the invitation. Yeah, well, I don't have already questions today, but as you were pointing out, I will talk a little bit about who I am, why I'm here. I am a Maya. I'm a captioning, which is one of the descendants of the Mayan people. So my people used to live in all the south of Mexico, through all Central America, and even some parts of South America before the Spanish conquerors arrived. And I would like to tell a little bit about what happened in Latin America, in Mesoamerica, because the story is a little different from what happened here in my perception. I know that here our brothers and sisters of the native peoples, the nations here, they suffer extermination. Because, white European colonizers came and they wanted to take the land and just settle here, make this their home. In our case, in Latin America, we were conquered by the Spanish and Portuguese people. And they had a different, perspective or thought of what they wanted. Yes, they wanted to come here and they wanted to be the lords in our land. But they needed slaves, that they would do the work that they were not able to do. They found that just like in all America, the richness of our land and the many resources we have. So the Spanish and Portuguese, they didn't want to exterminate us, but they wanted to exterminate who we were. And they wanted to colonize our minds, our souls, not our bodies, because our bodies were useful to them. Our hearts needed to change to this one vision of God, but they needed our hands, they needed our feet, and they needed our back to carry all the things that they were used to. So, and this is not a hatred thing, I know that this happened from this first cookie, but I'm not coming here to say, hey, you white people are responsible for that. No, I'm not saying that, and later on I will describe why I really have a lot of gratitude for each of you. Anyway, that's what happened in Guatemala many of the Latin American countries or nations, so that they needed the people, but they needed to take out our hope, our wisdom, anything that would sound, that is a risk for them, and they kept doing that over and over the centuries, years. In Guatemala, we had this very, very terrible internal or civil war that, started in the late 60s and finished in 80s, And a lot of that was because, many of our leaders started to get educated, many of our leaders started to raise their voice, And one of them was my father-in-law. He was one of the very first indigenous professionals in Guatemala. He started to work a lot for our culture. And he was killed by the army. And it's just an example of what they wanted to do. But they didn't want to exterminate the population. They wanted to kill the people, those that were able to think, raise the voice. So in that complex, I was born. And I grew up as a Catholic, in an indigenous family, very, very, normal. My father was a shoemaker, and also he had a little piece of land, And by little, I mean really little. He had less than 2 acres. But, I remember several times he telling me, look, I don't understand how some people will survive without having a land, without planting the corn, and without seeing how it grows. And that strong connection that indigenous people in Guatemala have with the land, with the family, is very important. And that's why you will find that most of Guatemalan indigenous people, they don't want to leave their communities. Maybe there is one child or two that will go to the city and work there, but the rest of the family stays there because we are so tied to the earth and to who we are. The family and the earth are so important to us. But as I said, I was raised as a Catholic. And my spiritual life started with that. It was a practice of going to the church on Sunday, Mass, to get these sacraments and, to follow the doctrine, the doctrine. And that was religion. When I was 16 years old, I met for the first time the Quakers because I was supported by this scholarship for which I work now. And this was the first time I hear somebody saying, hey, your culture is valuable. What you believe and what your people have believed over the centuries is something good. Before that, even at my home, we were taught that, this is some like witchery or something that is evil, you are worshiping the devil when you go these ceremonies. Anything that was out of the Catholic Church was bad. And then, it was like, too much for me at that time. A couple of years more, I continued in the Catholic Church, but I became a member of the Third Order of St. Francis, which is a lay order. And then I started to know how St. Francis, lived his experience and knowing that he was part of the whole. And that, probably you have heard about the chanting of the song of Brother Son, that he, praised God for, all the creatures. And then, I continued to be exposed to Quakerism. And then I learned that they also have this very, strong interest, at least, with nature and all of that. And then I started a new path where I tried to junction the three spiritualities, And I discovered that, you know, it depends on where you pay attention or how you pay attention to things. I mean, we're talking about listening so that we may live, but listening to what? And that's one of the things that I discovered is very important. Listening to what? I knew the three spiritualities, and from my Catholic, especially my Catholic background, it was, you know, more common that they would say, oh no, that's not good, you know, oh, you know, Quakers, they are Protestants, and no, they were against the church and all of that, and not to say about my spirituality. And then I discovered that the only problem is that, you know, we are afraid of the things that we don't know and don't understand. And then it was with Quakers that I participated in my first Mayan ceremony. And I was so lucky that this Mayan ceremony was done in Cachiquel, my native language. And then I could understand everything that the, if we call the Mayan spirituality leaders, you know, we don't like us to be called shamans or priests, you know, the term that we accept as Mayas are spiritual leaders or spiritual guides. And so, I mean, the chants they do, you know, how they work, it's just what I was doing here is a mini example of what they do, you know, and how they are so grateful and connected to the earth, to the nature, and how, you know, they teach that all of us are members of the same, you know, energy. For example, I know one of the words for death in Cachiquel, and that is Sologneil. And Sologneil means returning. Returning to where you came from, to the energy, the spirit. And so the best word for me for God is Rupush Ka Rupush Lev, which means the heart of the sky and the heart of the earth. And that's where we return, to that heart of the past. So that's what I have to say for now. Thank you very much.
One thing I was going to say I was going to do was to see if each of the speakers had any questions about the other one. And I'm sure you had a number of questions already. But did any come to mind?
Well, actually,
And you can,
oh yeah. Miguel, and I had a discussion earlier, and pretty much answered the questions I had. So I really enjoyed your story. And I'm discovering so many similarities with our, even though we're from different parts of the world, the similarities of our communities and our community.
Thank you.
why don't we hear a little bit about that?
Okay. I just want to preface this by saying, part of me, I love to tell stories, but I also love to tell history. So, my spiritual journey is directly connected to my culture, my history, and the impact of the oppressive government history and policies and laws. And so one of the things I wanted to start with is many of you may already know about this called the doctrine of discovery. And it's a framework for Christian explorers to lay claim to all of the territories and all the lands that are uninhibited by Christians. And so the entire North American continent actually was not a big land. There were 100 million of us on the entire North continent. And so this doctrine of discovery has really laid bare 550 years of land theft. And it impacted the losses of that. And the reason why I share this is because we've been here at time immemorial since the beginning of time. And so along with the land loss, also the decimation of the salmon. I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I was born and raised in Washington State. My father was born in Wrangell, Alaska, a small village. And there was a time where you could go across the river with the salmon on the back of the salmon, just stepping on the back of the salmon across the river. And now the salmon are small and they're full of mercury and lots of pollution. And this was a pristine, beautiful land. And my hope is that we can get back there. Working together, we can get back there. And so because of the collusion between the churches and the government, the boarding schools were created. And I need to share this because it directly impacted my father. My father, at age 9 years old, was taken from our family. It was the government policy to take all the children. Imagine all your children being taken from you. And they're not allowed to speak your language. And they're taken from them. And when my father was sent to a boarding school, he was beaten for speaking the language. And I share the story because it is so painful. And the reason why I share is the impact is still here. It didn't happen just 500 years ago. It happened in my life, my father's life. And I did not know, he would talk about it. And I had gone to work. And there was one Tlingit at work. And it was like to meet another Tlingit. And so he taught me 2 Tlingit words. My father and I were driving down the road going grocery shopping. And after we were going grocery shopping, we had our lunch afterwards. And we were heading home, and I was so proud of myself. I said those 2 Tlingit. But sheesh. And he's driving. We could not speak the rest of the day. These policies have consequences. The reason I share that is because the community and our families were torn. They were sent from where they knew how to live and survive, and they were bused or shipped to a whole other part of the country. Like Pacific Northwest, we're used to seaweed and evergreen trees and fresh air and salty fresh air and smoked salmon is my favorite. And then sent to a whole other part of the country that may be desert, nothing about that. That was very intentional. That was part of the genocide. That's part of the fun. And part of the reason why I'm sharing also this is today we're on the eve of the 4th of July. So I wanted to share with you in the Declaration of Independence document itself, refers to us natives as merciless Indian society. It's still in there. And the reason why I share that is because I don't really celebrate the 4th. And because I just want to remind the revolution wasn't just only an effort to establish independence from the British, was also to push and preserve slavery and to suppress Native Americans. And so the violence that was caused by the colonists invading our native lands, that's why we were fighting for them. Imagine someone coming to your home and saying, you can't speak your language, you can't have the children. In fact, if you don't do what we're going to do, what you do for just 100 million natives down to 250,000. And I share the story because I am now one of 26,000 Alaska Natives. So we are coming back. And part of the reason I share this is because we're coming back through healing. Our language is being revitalized. We are taking possessions of our land, or trying to. In fact, my father's village was taken by, we call them the Black Ropes. And still to this day, I'm landless. And I don't know if any of you have been homeless. I've gone through that more than one time in this life. And so the history and the language and the connection to the land and the standard are so critical to our lives, right? Water is life, salmon is life. In fact, salmon is an indigenous species. We need to fresh air, fresh water, and fresh food to live and survive. And that's why I became Buddhist. I wanted to become nature. Buddhahood exists in all beings, is characterized by the qualities of wisdom, peace, happiness, and enlightenment. And so that was a way for me to find peace. That was a way for me to come back into my life. That was a way for me to embrace my way of being and become proud of who I am. My father didn't get that opportunity. And so I have full regalia, and I'm very honored. I have baptism. I have two cedar hats. I have full robe. And part of it because my mother couldn't. And I'm number 7 of 7 children. And the only one in the family was carrying my legacy. What other piece to that? I also live in the spirit to what I need to share. And I often don't share this story, but I am so thankful that you have your children here. Because the U.S. government made sure that I did it. I never could have children. It's a bit of a story, but in 1970, they passed a law. And I'll never forget. A white doctor standing over me asking me, well, you're a Native American, right? And I looked up and went, what is that? He said nothing. I take the prescription to the pharmacy, and the pharmacist goes, and I'm young. I don't know what that means. I don't know what to ask. If we're going to we tried to couldn't happen. And never catch it. And so connecting to my Mother Earth, to my drum, to my singing, to my story, and through being in places like this, so that it doesn't get forgotten. I have a fairly quick story. 5 million, but one quick story. I was teaching in North Seattle, over 500 kids, K-8. And I just loved doing that work. And they had full regalia and teaching them about the salmon, and teaching them about my budget, like picking the moccasins, and telling them about the longhouses and the importance of the longhouses, there's a protocol who sits in the back of the longhouse all the way to the front. And also talked about the differences between the teepees and the longhouses and why there's the differences. And at the end, I had taken my regalia. I had full business attire underneath. I thought I was waiting another meeting from there. So I picked my cedar hat and my, my blanket off and my moccasins, put my tennis shoes on. This little 5-year-old comes up to me and goes, remember we talked about teepees and longhouses? Where do you like go in a condominium? Yeah. And part of the reason why I share that story is because and that's why I like to, when I sing, I like to uplift, is the story and the pain of the story that runs into the river, that runs into the land. And part of the reason why is in the Buddhist philosophy, they describe your body is the universe, your body is the universe. Like our hair is the truth. Veins are the rivers. The heart, the sound of the heart is the ocean. And when I beat my drum and I do my rhythm, I am one with my drum and one with Mother Earth and grandmother's heart. So we have 4 directions, but we have 7 directions. We have 4 directions, north, south, east, west, above, below, and number 7 is the center. And it just so happens I'm going to be 7 and 7. I feel very honored. So I share these stories because with more knowledge and acknowledgement and a reckoning of truth, that's when we can make change. That's what we can say. It's beyond apology. I want more than apology. I'd love to have my land back. I'd take 2 acres and a mule. Actually, a mule. And so I don't want to lower, but I also want to uplift. The truth will set you free, but also because we're in a community, I want to give hope and upliftment. So I want to keep this.
I'm guessing you have a good question. Move on to the audience. Well, yeah, I have one question. Maybe it was leading to several questions. For us in Guatemala, part of what has made it possible for us to survive is keeping our language, is keeping our traditions, our beliefs. So I have here this with me who was made by one of our students come from the Chile area. It's just to have a piece of my students with me here, and to keep their heart and that. But that's part of our lives, our history. So how actually, I don't know how to ask this, but so for me, it's very hard to think, in how my culture could have survived if it's not because we kept our language, because we didn't keep our reading and the history that's here. So I hear that for your people, and many of the native nations in this part of America, that was just like, cut from the root of us. So how do you people do to keep alive without those very important elements for us?
So glad you asked that question because I have another story connected to that. Is long ago, what our people did is there would be an elder. By the way, my people were matrilineal and matriarch. And so what would happen is there'd be one or two persons that are like record keepers, but remember the old tradition, old teaching. And so when the children were leaving, those who didn't know the language and the culture, and like when something happens in your family and it's pretty traumatic, and all you have to do is take a look at each other and you know. And so that person was the person who kept the language, and there would be a small group would get together and talk amongst themselves. And many ran away, and then the others committed suicide who couldn't move forward or back. And so those who were able to speak the language kept it, but shared it. And another thing that happened is we had what they call potlatching ceremonies, which are different from powwows. Powwows are very different. There's similarities, but different. Potlatching was actually outlawed. And so what we did to keep it alive is we told them when you're learning in their school and they teach you about Christmas, right? So we just told them that was our Christmas. And then instead of doing springtime, we moved it into the winter time because that's when we do Christmas. So that some of the things, you have to do in order to keep your spirit strong, or in order to keep your language, or in order to keep your culture. And and then one by one, they would teach each other. Now, part of the unfortunate thing, and not just here in the Northwest and Alaska, but all over the North American continent, I can't speak, you can speak on the other continent, is there's, and I members of multiple Native people, groups, and there are only a handful now of elders who are in their 80s, 90s, 100s, who might be the last speaker. And so fortunately, we're hoping the youth learning the language and that can be passed on. And then now with technology and recording and video recording and documenting and actually putting in and writing it out. So those are some of the ways. And then of course, just singing, dancing, drumming, really lifts the spirit and having a sense of
Thank you. Thank you both. While you get a chance to have a sip of water, each of you, we're going to collect some cards now. Jessica and Kate will walk down the aisle. You want to send your card towards the aisle, and we'll ask the question. I'm going to go over to the technology. I'll head over to the computer and see if there's any questions on chat.
you can bet you will be getting a homemade card, ...
Well, the best I could tell, Zoom people are very quiet, and they're getting all their questions answered without having to ask them. I'm looking through these because I think some of these are half-hour questions. And so those might be ones that get asked afterwards. And oh, okay, we'll start with one for Ellany. I used to teach language, so I like this one. Ellany, how do you feel about non-natives learning native languages, assuming they're not profiting from it?
As long as they're not profiting. Now, there is a very tricky about co-option, right? Very, very tricky. So it's one thing to learn and learn about it. It's one thing to learn. It's also another thing to profit off of it. And it's one of the things that I recommend. There are some very specific places to go for very specific languages. Make sure that you go to the right instructor. And now, for example, Tlingit and Haida are actually now on discs and digitally now. And like you said, as long as they're not profiting.
I'm doing what I remember reading about as a kid, where somebody said, how was your trip to someplace? Person said, I fell in the bathtub, broke my leg, and never went. And their next question was, so what did you see there? Trying to pay attention to some of these. Here's one for both of you, but let's start with Miguel. Our Quaker rituals have become thin. How does the power of ritual keep your people strong? Our Quaker rituals have become thin. How does the power of ritual keep your people strong?
Well, yeah, it depends on what kind of rituals I would say. And yeah, for during the Mayan ceremonies, I always have felt that most Guatemalans, are kind of very visual, and we like to be able to see and to taste things. And so in a traditional Mayan ceremony, you have all these elements. You have the candles, you have the incense, you have all the aromatic things that we burn and that we offer to God. And so that reminds of the beauty. For example, a lot of people that don't know about what this means, and they say, oh, you are doing things that are forbidden, and you are invoking other things. But when we do our ceremonies, we put flowers, we put incense, and several other different things. Some of them that I can show in the work provide tomorrow. And all of them smell nice, and all of them are like the best of nature that you offer to the same universe. And that, to me, has this special meaning that I am part of everything. We are connected. We are giving to the universe something that came from the universe, and it's like it's a cycle. So, and on the other hand, I can see, what happens in Catholic Church. That we have all this Roman rights that were created, there, I don't know where exactly, Rome or something. And sometimes they don't have a meaning. I mean, you do it because you do it and you have faith and everything. But when you start to think about them, it doesn't sound too much. So that's what I think I can say about it.
Thank you. And you were lying, you look like you have an answer.
I have a very specific example. Every other year, all the tribes in Alaska get together, especially the Tlingits, the Haidas, and the Shinshians. We get together in Juneau in June. And always the first Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So we fly in Tuesday or Wednesday, then fly on Sunday. Now we do protocol. Protocol is singing, we're dancing, we're drumming. We have our dancing masks, we have our dancing paddles. We have our full regalia, and just the regalia, they're so brilliant, full of color like a flag. And everyone is singing and dancing, and then every group, every family has their song. It might be the same song, but they sing it slightly different. And so the protocols are continuously taught through year after year. So we practice all year, and it takes 2 years to plan this gathering, and we take over the whole town. So we have a parade, and we have the soapberry ice cream competition. There's little children wearing full regalia competition. There are, and we sing that around for 3-4 days, nonstop. And then we go out to the beach, and then there's a canoe journey, a small canoe journey. And so the whole time we're eating our salmon and our seaweed and our rice and those kinds of things. And so it's amazing how when there is a particular group that everyone loves, so crowd is really energized, and we all start singing the song, and it really uplifts our heart and our spirit. And there are some songs that are really smooth and fun and funny, and others that are powerful, deep, that go on for, a long time. And my first time in 1990, I got to drum for an 8 hours solid, the same song. By the end of that day, I felt like I was flown like an eagle. And also in 1990, I reconnected with a woman that I worked with when she and I worked at United Indians of All Tribes Foundation in Seattle. And that was before we actually had the big, beautiful Daybreak Star. We worked in the old Army barracks back in the 70s. And when the lights went out and there was no heat, he still had to work. So my typewriter would shut down. But we didn't have computers back then, so couldn't make copies or anything. But we would tell stories, and so through the stories, through the songs, and being together is how we would keep strong. And that woman that I worked with, I had been wanting to participate with her group when I was working in United Indians. But our tradition is to never ask. We wait to be asked. So I would never self-invite myself somewhere. I would wait to be asked. I waited for 20 years. And I saw her, reconnected with her in Juneau, in Alaska. And she asked me, can you drum with our group? And I got to help with the total flow raising, and that took 4 hours of drumming. I was so honored, and that's how we keep strong.
I would like to add something that Mayan ceremonies also in the end there is food, of course, you know. And so it depends on the size and what you're celebrating. But it's kind of a rule that you are welcoming to everybody. Several years ago, I was leading a group. Several of them were Quakers, and we visited Chinche, which is a Mayan, an old Mayan city very close to my town. And, you know, I was with these 8 ladies there, you know, and we stayed for, you know, about 15 minutes watching, you know, the end of a Mayan ceremony. And then right away, they finished, you know, they started to serve lunch. And then, you know, these 3 women came with plates, you know, and tortillas and stuff, and so chicken on it, and they served, you know, all. The other time, Donna is here, and so we were in Chichicastenango, you know, watching a big ceremony of Ashishab, which are the spiritual Mayan leaders. And, you know, they noticed that we were there with respect and, you know, watching them carefully what they were doing. You know, and not like other people that, you know, stop a little bit, take a picture, and then they go. And so we stayed there, and then, you know, they were sharing, you know, a couple of special alcohol that they drink there. And so they were, these 2 guys coming, and then Donna looked at me and said, oh, they are coming to us. And she said, you know, am I supposed to drink that? And you know, is it okay? I mean, I don't want to offend them. And I said, oh, you know, it's just part of who we are, and we want people to celebrate it. So they gave us you know, a couple of this our gift, you know, and you know, cheer with them. So it's a very important part, and that makes community. That makes that okay. You want to do it again.
There's another question that relates to each of your answers to the topic here. Actually, some of these questions are what they're going to talk about next. So I'm looking through and saying, oh, they have that. Oh, this is not it. Here we go. This is for Ellany. How do you consider misappropriation or not of native tradition if European Americans adopt the practice of reading the 7 directions?
Oh, I've actually seen that witnessed. Doing the 7 directions actually is honoring everyone. So I think that, this is my opinion, and I can speak for 575 other recognized tribes. Of which there are 29 other recognized tribes in Washington State and 5 here in Oregon. As long as you explain what it is that you're doing and how to honor each other. One quick story is we're down at the beach. I was administrative cultural director of a program that was physically housed at Gathering Star, which is where United Indian Fellow Tribes Foundation. And we were leading this summer group for 7 weeks with all Native children. And I can recall we were on the beach. It was really low tide, so we planned all these events all summer long. And at one point, the couple kids were like just kind of thrashing through the pond. I said, remember, that's someone's home. See those little fish? That's their house. So let's be on, let's not thrash through that water that way. Let's respect those fish, right? Wouldn't you want to be respected too? And so always trying to find a way to connect to how do we respect each other, how do we respect ourselves and Mother Earth, grandfather side. How do we, you know, this is our only planet. There's no planet B, right? This is it. So we're always trying to show and share how to be respectful of each other.
For Miguel, how did you connect with Quakers? What were they doing in your village?
Well, when I was 16 and I finished, you know, what here would be a junior high school, which, we had a school in my town, and I was able to finish that. So I was going to the next level, which is, we call diversificado, which is high school for you. And in Guatemala, we still have that system on which high school you study those 3 years or 2 years sometimes now, but you have to take a specialty because, getting to college was something that was not available to almost all of the indigenous population, especially. And so it's like if you finish high school, you have a degree. So, and that meant for me that I needed to leave my town and go out and look for a place. So that meant more money, money that my family didn't have. And so, luckily, and thank God in the universe, so in my school, I studied in a public school, of course, there was a teacher. She knew about the Quakers and about the scholarship program. And by the way, I think I have mentioned that this program, PROGRESA, which is the Guatemala Press Scholarship Program, started in 1973. So we are celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. And so it has changed the lives of so many people in Guatemala and our families. So this woman, of course, a non-indigenous woman who was a teacher, she came and said, I know several of you have problems with money, so you want to continue studying. So if anybody's able, I know some people that could help, And so come to my office and I will talk to you, Gary. I don't know how many of any of my classmates went, but I did, and that's how she talked to me, Here are these people, se llaman los cuáqueros. What is that? And they are very nice people. They are foreigners and everything, but they like food and they have been helping people here for 20 years or so at that time. And so, yeah, I can give you their snail address. And so I sent a telegram that those days. And that's how I started the process. And I became a student in the scholarship program. I, became a very good friend of at least one of the Quakers that were running the program. And little by little, I entered the organization. And now I'm the director.
Thank you. Here's one that I don't know whether it's for one or both of you, so I'll ask both of you, and one of you will jump in. It says, how can Quakers today restore trust with your peoples? The question to me implies that Quakers don't have trust.
Well, one thing I was thinking is doing what you're doing now. You're learning, you're listening, and some things have participated in an earlier workshop that I gave actually by Zoom. I created a curriculum called Building Bridges Between Cultures. And so it's a 90 minute. I had to pivot from a full day to a 90-minute online. And no handouts, now it's, Zoom and chat and things like that. So part of it is, learning the history, learning the impact, and then, and I always welcome people. It's okay to make mistakes about my group because that's how we learn, right? We learn from our mistakes. And what do we normally learn in school if we make a mistake? Punish. We lose a job, or we lose a home, or something devastating happens. And so I firmly believe that as we share and as we communicate and work together and build those bridges together. So I bring my plank out and you bring your plank out. Planks being like your planks, right? And that's that's where we start learning and growing and healing. And so it's always with an open heart. And then, of course, there will be sore spots, and that's okay. And anytime you feel uncomfortable, I welcome you to lean into that being and comfort. Because what that means is you're learning. So it's important to be uncomfortable.
My experience, I think that all that Ellany said, and having this mutual feeling of enrichment that I think this program, and now I'll talk a little bit about the program because that's how I relate it directly with Quakers, is that this is about one of the very few groups that haven't asked anything in exchange. Quakers have helped my people without proselytizing, without saying, okay, I help you, but you have to believe what I do. And my friends, the Quakers that have come to Guatemala and talk to the students, it's always they go with that intention that we want to learn from you. And if you want, we can, share with you also who we are and what we do. And that's something that doesn't happen easily in third world countries where, you have power of the United States here and we know everything and, I'm going to help you, but, it's like I'm God and you are here, And so Quakers don't do that. And that is something that I deeply, deeply appreciate. Because it was, you that made me understand that my culture is valued and that I have something to offer you the same way as you offer something. And so I think if you just keep that way, don't change. And because that really eventually, probably at the beginning, I remember my own case, looking at this. I was 15 years old when I first met this guy, this tall guy, with white hair and, very different from who I was. But little by little, to see that, all that world of differences between the two of us came up because we were willing to share, who we were in our free ways. But that's what I did.
Speaking of sharing, what I've written here literally is, what would you want people attending tonight to know that you haven't already shared? In other words, what has great part and meaning for you in your daily life and in your work? Go ahead and start and right up to the microphone.
Yes. What has hurt and meaning for me is doing anti-racism work. That is what I live for. I've been doing it for over 40 years. And I love to teach about my culture and history. And you probably noticed through my storytelling, I can't help but put little tidbits of history and knowledge and information. Can't help it. I like to share more about what's happening and the impacts. And I just wanted to also say that, we're all made up of energy. We're all, for me, we're all made up of like star stuff, energy of the Big Bang, and then all the stuff flying in the air. And we came together, and it's no accident that we're here in this room together tonight. And so I believe that through this work and through the healing, there can be big change, and we can undo institutionalized racism together.
Well, First, I want to say thank you, and again, my deep gratitude to all of you for all the wonderful things that you do. And what I would like to say is that please don't see Native people as just a people folklore. And oh, you know how nice these Native people look, and I have a picture with them. Oh my gosh, like sometimes, you know, in Guatemala, we see that a lot, and we feel like the monkeys on a zoo, you know, where they go over there. So, if you ever go to a place like Guatemala or here with the native people here, please try to think that you are going like to Italy, where you see these monumental cathedrals and the paintings, and you're like, oh my God, Miguel Angél and their painting. This is art also, and this is our life. And you know, we deserve the same respect and the same amaze, you know, that probably you will see in other places. So please don't make us just feel that we are, you know, I how to say, this is a world ornament, you know, because we are more than that, you know, our culture is alive, we have wisdom, and also remember that this respect for native people and our worldview is as respectful as any other worldview in the world, and probably more important, you know, more valuable than others, because we try to keep this connection with the earth, and we try to live our values and our spirituality on a daily basis, you know, and it is not only something about going to church on first day or Sunday, no, we try to. And if you remember, I told you that my parents, they, you know, at some point they said, you know, we don't want to deal with this Mayan spirituality, but they did it every day and without noticing. And my father, you know, when he was going to plant the corn, he will go on his knees. And that has a very special meaning for us. And a Mayan ceremony can't be done if you don't go on your knees, because that means you connect your body with your land, with her, and you become one with her. And so my father, before starting planting, he will ask permission, and he will say thank you, and he will say something like, please forgive me because I will cut, because I will hurt you. But I do this just because I need food for my family. So that is a way of life, a way of how you see it. So that is what it means. And I would like to give my answer also to some of the questions, you know, because I have been asked about this too. Is it right that we, you know, foreigners wear this, you know, like, you know, some of our friends are looking at already. And it's the same that Ellany says, as long as you do it with respect and with the recognition that this is a piece of art, and this is something that a real person did with love, with art, that is fine with us. And so, and we appreciate that you wear this and that you, but as I said, just like if you are wearing a piece of art of any other part.
I have one very quick story. The one thing I also like to share is about the salmon. So when we go and catch the salmon, we thank the salmon for its life. And we do a ceremony with a plate of all the food, and we lay it out next to the water, the ocean, the river. And we do a ceremony, a salmon ceremony. And as we're eating the salmon spirit is now part of us. So the salmon is living through us.
Well, I can't thank you enough. I think we all are very, very thrilled to have you here tonight. And let's hear it for you. I do want to mention that at Kitchen Group tomorrow night, Miguel is offering a session on mind and spirituality. So you'll get to learn more than the snippet that you got tonight. And that both of our presenters have agreed to stay and meet people down here if you have some questions that you'd like to ask them directly. And why don't we end with just a little bit of silence?